Thank you for being with us this morning on the Healthcare Leadership Excellence Podcast. We appreciate you as our listeners. I am always delighted to have repeat guests, and this one is an all-star. I ran across his first book about 10 years ago, Prescription for Excellence, which was about the UCLA healthcare system. Then I found his book on Ritz-Carlton, the gold standard, Mercedes-Benz, Driven to Distraction. And one reason we're talking to this author today, who is one of literally the world's leaders in how customer service works, is his brand new book on Amazon's One Medical, All Business is Personal. So Dr. Joseph Michelli, PhD, welcome back. Great to have you.
I keep coming back because I'm a fan of yours, Carl. I think what you're doing to inspire leaders and give them tools through podcasts and through your other services is just remarkable in the healthcare space. So I could not be happier than to be here right now.
So just give us a brief background on your trajectory. Are you up to 15 books now?
Ooh, 14. Yeah. I think I may retire at 15. I've got one more in the can, I think, coming up due in 2028. So 2027. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what brought you to write about One Medical?
Wow. So I worked, the book you referenced, Prescription for Excellence, I worked with two amazing leaders at UCLA Health Systems. They were in the bottom third of CSAT scores and in terms of age gaps. So they worked really hard to transform that. I was a consultant for them back in the day, and that would be David Feinberg, who's had a storied journey of being over at Geisinger afterwards and then heading over to Vice President of Google Health. He then went to Oracle. And so he's an amazing leader. He was the CEO there. And then the COO was a guy by the name of Amir Dan Rubin, who then went on to be CEO at Stanford Stanford Health and their entire health system. And then he went on and worked for Optum for a while, but he ultimately landed back at One Medical. And so when he was back at One Medical, I got together with him and I consulted for him there about their experience, their customer experience. And we stayed really close through the years. They got bought by Amazon for $4 billion. And I was saying, now's the time maybe to tell the story of this med tech startup and how you got to that level of market attractiveness. And at that point, we decided to do the book. And of course, after that, all these folks, after you get a big payout like that, a lot of them have moved on to other great pursuits.
So just a question, looking and having read many of your books, looking at the bookshelf behind you here, how do you get inside the workings of the Starbucks, the Zappos, the Mercedes, the Ritz-Carltons, UCLA, Amazon? How do you get in and allow that level of confidence to where you just wander the halls, as it were, at will, talking to key people? Because to our listeners, when you read his books, these are not 30,000 views. These are in the weeds of details. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, at first it wasn't easy. Let me be really candid about that. But it always starts with trying to create value. I think this is a lesson for all of us, irrespective of industry, right? If we walk into every situation, we say, how might I create value? For Carl today, in the early days, it was the Pike Place Fish Market in Seattle, Washington, and having worked inside of the business and helping it from its bankruptcy to breakthrough time, then that story I am typically allowed to tell, right? Like after having worked through that transformation at Pike Place Fish Market, and then because that story hits the universe, then either I reach out to someone that I'm very interested in, and that's my entry card, or frequently, and it's really been mostly this for the books that I write, the companies reach out to me. So someone like a Howard Schultz at Starbucks was very enamored by the Pike Place Fish Market. It was only half a block away from the original Starbucks store, right? But it took a little work to get in that door and ultimately, work with Howard and then write a book about Starbucks. And yeah, well, I then knocked on the door of Ritz-Carlton and said, is there anything I could do to be of assistance to you, given what I've done in my track record? And it was a long sell because they have a proud history of doing great things. And yet somehow or another, after a long due diligence process, they let me in and we did some work together. And then once you're in doing the work, it's just a matter of seeing which brands really will be willing to let you tell their story. Because it puts a bullseye on your back in part. It gives away some of your secret sauce in part. Someone like a Tony Hsieh would tell you that, let me give away all my secret sauce. It's the execution that really makes a difference. And most people who read it aren't going to take the level of discipline to execute. And if they did, all the better, because the world would have better service experiences and I would benefit from it when I go into other service establishments. So I think the brands that let me tell the story after I've worked for them, or the brands that I want to tell the story for. Like, I work with a lot of brands that I really respect, but it's not going to make a book that people are going to want to read broadly because they don't have Amazon associated with it, or they don't have the Ritz-Carlton or Mercedes-Benz associated with them.
And just a personal note here to our listeners. Because many of you are with healthcare, if you're thinking at all that, what does Mercedes or Ritz or Zappos or a fish market have to do with my work today at the hospital? Wow, please listen carefully over the next few minutes, because it has everything to do with the attitude you take in, and we now have a chance to talk literally to one of the best people on the planet about this. So, Joseph, in our pre-call here, we were talking about companies in crises sometimes cutting back on things that shouldn't be cut back on, and you talk about investing in teams.
Yeah.
What would
there are lots of points to follow on this. Let me just go first with, I think in some ways, healthcare does look a lot to other industries, but oftentimes then discounts it and says, I can't be a Ritz-Carlton because, we're not trying to create pleasure. We're trying to alleviate suffering and create great clinical outcomes. So it's a whole different thing. I'm not going to be able to get 90% net promoter scores because patients come to me asking me for narcotics when it's not in their interest, and I have to say no, right? And I get that. I mean, it is a different world in healthcare, but I think the core principles of how we respect human beings and cause them to leave us feeling that they had been dignified in the experience are very much the same. And many of the things we need to focus on are the same. So I think it is important. And when to your point about investing, I'll go back to Tony Hsieh for just an example at Zappos. He used to talk about their contact center as not a cost center, but as an opportunity center. It's an opportunity to enable the folks who were in that location to do what they were titled to do. They were called customer loyalty team members, not contact center members. He saw every human interaction as an opportunity to drive emotional engagement and loyalty. And if you think about it in a healthcare setting, every time we have a touch point, a human-to-human touch point with someone, we have a chance to solidify for them that we are committed to their well-being, their healing, and just random acts of kindness.
And this, I'm sure you'll be able to give us some details. I read an article once on those Zappos loyalty, and it's blow away what they were allowed to do. Can you give us a short story on that?
Yeah, I'll give you a super short story. If I were to contact Zappos, and this is something we worked on early on, if I contacted Zappos today and asked for a pair of shoes in a certain size and they did not have it in their inventory, the training is to look into the inventory of your competitor. If you can see it as best you can in their inventory, it might not be real time, but to the best you can, and you think it's there, you're going to send the customer to that location. You're going to send them the SKU. You're going to make it as easy as possible for them to get their shoes, because it's not about our purchase today. It's about you getting what you need today. Now, we'll also send a bounce back coupon, and here's where the loyalty number comes into play. Normally, bounce back coupons, even if everything goes right, are redeemed somewhere in the area of about 40% in most online retail. At Zappos, the redemption rate of the bounce back coupon was upwards of 80%. Now, this is for a transaction that they failed to have the product you wanted, right? And I think it speaks volumes to what is our goal in every interaction. And at Zappos, it's to create a wowful experience, not a sale. And the wowful experience sometimes is just that I'm willing to actually direct you to some place where you can get what you need, as opposed to doing, trying to sell you something you didn't. And in the process, I'll give you a chance to get a discount the next time, almost service recovery, but really to re-engage you back into a relationship with us.
And so if there's people out there in the medical that are thinking, yeah, great example, but it doesn't apply. Let me just tell you, about 20 years ago, I had a medical procedure done, and it was done on a Friday. And on Saturday morning, I get a call from the doctor giving me the results. And he said, I know you were concerned and I didn't want your weekend. And this guy is a gruff, he is not a model of bedside. But I didn't want you to worry all weekend. So I just wanted to let you know the procedure is good. You're clear.
And 20 years later, you're telling the story.
And I have gone back to him repeatedly over the years.
Yep.
Is there a provider closer? Yes. Is there a provider more convenient? Yes. I will never leave that provider until he retires because of that one call.
And truthfully, his clinical outcomes may much be completely on par if we looked at quality data with the clinical outcomes of everyone else, right? In terms of at least the actual procedural success. But when it comes down to my feeling comfortable with wanting to choose him over another provider, it's clear that those little things make the difference. It builds that kind of loyalty, that stickiness. And, then there's a whole discussion about, is medicine really retail? Do I get to choose, or is it dictated by the insurance companies? But let's be real. Over the last couple of decades, there's been a real shift to the retailization of healthcare, and people are making more choices, and third-party payers are not paying as much of the overall bill. So people are feeling more of a personal ownership in the decision making, and they're looking at websites and comparatives, and they're seeing what people are saying about doctors and the way they're treated. So I think the time has come for people who discount the importance of the subjective, softer side of medicine to kind of wake up. Amazon bought One Medical because they created the technologies and the human interface that gives them net promoter scores in the 90s, comparable to the net promoter scores of a Ritz-Carlton.
Wow. So, as I mentioned, I gave a talk a little while back to physician executives. Is there hard data out there that says that these soft skills, the connection, the mentorship, the wow experience at Zappos, my doctor phoning me on a Saturday morning, is there data that says, as crass as it may sound, that pays off on the bottom line?
Well, absolutely. And starting in the 2000s, I think we've had a medical gap identified that really emphasized the importance of patient-centered care. So not just treating the symptoms and not just treating the disease state, but treating the entire person, considering their emotional well-being, considering their background values, considering their family, their access to care. All of that has to be factored in. And if you look at the empirical research on this, it does drive better clinical outcomes. It decreases the likelihood that people are going to be back in getting costly procedures that work against you, say in a hospital setting for return rates. If you're driving better clinical outcomes, and reimbursement is based on your ability to treat the whole person, the emotional state of the person as well as their physical bodies, and treating them with that whole person approach creates a better engagement in their care, and thus better follow through and better outcomes. This is just a virtuous cycle. If you want to say what's causative about it, it's very hard. These are highly correlated, high correlations between HCAHPS scores and clinical outcomes. So I think they're inextricably linked. You can fix my body, but if I don't comply with the treatment regimen because I didn't feel like you cared about me, you cared for me in your procedure, but you didn't care about me. So why should I care about myself to do the things you just told me? Or maybe you can help me care about myself if you care about me enough. So I'm really, the data's there. I'm glad to provide the empirical data. Much of it is in the book. We've got lots of data that we're providing in the book that's coming out soon. So I think it's in there, and certainly One Medical has outperformed quality metrics on a lot of things because they really do a lot of nurturing behaviors that help people stay on their health path.
When is the book released? Mid-May?
Mid-May, yeah. So people can purchase it now. It's available at Porchlight or at Amazon or anywhere good books are sold. That's what I like to say. I love that line.
There we go. That's one of the reasons Amazon stock goes up is because of my bookshelves in back of me. So
that's exactly it.
One of the things I run into is when I talk about this with clients, as I do coaching, is, yeah, Carl, that's great, but my organization, they're just into results, etc. And what guidance would you give to someone? There's that phrase, think globally, act locally. What are some ideas about customer service that a charge nurse or a nurse manager or a new physician executive over a neurology department, what can they do within a massive organization who may not have the insights that your books promote? What can they do just on a I can do this today type of approach?
Well, I think you start with where Tom Lee started One Medical. So Tom Lee was a physician trained at Harvard, primary care physician trained at Harvard. He got his business degree from Stanford, so not a very sharp guy, But he kept asking one question over and over again: why do we do this? Why do we do everything that we do? And I'll give you examples of what he meant by why. So when he started off, this was in the days of the BlackBerry. Certainly, we weren't interconnected in the smartphone ways that we are today. But literally, he would ask questions like, why do patients have to call in to get an appointment? Why do patients have to sit in a waiting room and an exam room? Why do they have to cross by the scale unless weight is a relevant variable to their care or it's an annual physical? Why is that a regular checkup, a pain point for patients, an anxiety point for patients without need? And he just asked these kind of questions over again. Why is it so sterile in our waiting rooms? Why do they all look the same? Everything was subject to question. And so then he just said, let's create value. If you want to talk about throwing results, let's throw results that create value for patients. And in the process, we will attract more and more patients to want that experience. So literally, if you went to One Medical, 97% of their appointments are done within 3 minutes of the scheduled time. The provider walks out from the treatment area to you and walks you back in, avoiding the scale unless necessary. And so you're in there, they're going to use AI with your permission, to record the session so that it's transcribing that information. So it's not something that the provider has to focus their attention on, but can instead focus their vision on you, not treating an electronic record as well they're treating you. It's being captured independent of them, and then they can focus their attention on you. There's that sense of being rushed. And the provider's in street clothes. The conversation in the walkway is one that's anxiety reducing. All of that is part of redesigning. Now, if you do that so well and you get a beachhead in San Francisco like they did, and they've got some great technologists who help develop their own proprietary medical record, then you are able to allow your providers to have pajama time without having to treat the chart, which creates value for them, which then causes you to be able to attract them to a greater degree. And retain them in a time when we're having such a crisis in healthcare. You do all of that, and sooner or later, you can have people pay just to get admission to this. So at One Medical, you started by paying maybe $69. It's probably up to about $200 a year to just have access to the technology and to be able to do those same day, next day appointments in this better environment, if you will. You still have to have your insurance pay for the actual procedure. It's not like that $200 gets you any free medical care. It just gives you access to the ease and the enhanced experience. You do that well enough, and you hit your one beachhead and extend it to the next, to the next, to the next. And 10, 12 years later, Amazon buys you for $4 billion.
Amazing. So for that charge nurse wondering what I can do differently within an organization that is not forward thinking, what would you say for customer service strategies that she or he could use just today?
You know exactly the things that repeatedly frustrate your team and your patients. Really start asking, why do we have to do it this way? And if we could think of a different way to do it, if we could forget who we were yesterday, and we could imagine it from scratch on what would be best for our patient and for my team member, and we designed that, and we fought administration potentially. Sometimes I think you can, if this is not compromising any clinical standards or any of those things, sometimes it's better to get forgiveness than permission. You just try some things. You try to zig when the organization keeps zagging. And if you start showing some benefits, patient-centric benefits, human-centric benefits to your team members, then you start advocating that this becomes a way of changing overall processes. But I think a lot of us are scared to do anything other than what has always been done, even though it doesn't make any sense to us why we're still doing it this way. I mean, in healthcare in general, things like faxes in healthcare are a pretty good example of kind of leaving ourselves in a distant time. And I have a son was in telephony in healthcare, and it's just, it's one of the few places where faxes reign when technologies are available to secure electronic transmissions.
Yeah. I am not the most tech savvy, and I was blown away a little while back when someone said, well, can you fax it to us? And I'm looking down here at my wall thinking, man, I think it's been pre-pandemic that I had a fax, and you really?
I miss the smell of Mimeo, the Mimeo paper too. And yeah, all those old technologies.
So knowing that sometimes healthcare truly is locked in, this is the way we've always done it. I've seen that there's been some criticisms from larger organizations in healthcare of the Amazon approach, that it's cookie cutter, etc. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, the future is to be told. Big tech companies trying to get involved in healthcare have a long storied history of not being successful. So we'll see where Amazon goes. The challenge for, Amazon is the core competencies and how well they align up with the mission of healthcare, right? That's always a challenge. I know personally, the one thing that I absolutely, totally love is being able to get a virtual appointment. I'm a One Medical member, and I'll get a virtual appointment wherever I land. I don't have to, worry about contacting my insurance company. And if I'm in a different city, it can get a little dicey. I just tell One Medical on my app, I'm in whatever, it knows where I am. And then they get me a provider and I treat me now. So first off, they'll give me a triage of what are your symptoms, and just a series of questions that kind of helps me know, do I need to get to urgent care? Is this something I should treat me now? It sounds like it could be this, but let's assume I need to treat me now. I push the button. Within 5 minutes, somebody's going to answer who's licensed in that state. I'm going to be able to get the treatment while I'm traveling, doing a speaking engagement, have it sent to me through Amazon Pharmacy at a decreased rate where I know the price before they send it, and I don't have to wait in a traditional pharmacy setting and then come up after waiting 20 minutes scrolling around the store to find out how much it's going to cost me. There's just a lot of things that are good. That said, the fear is, are we going to be tech forward to the point that we don't sustain the human spirit and the human touch? That's to be determined, and we shall see. But I think the story I'm telling is the one that made a company worthy of having that kind of investment. And how do we create enough value that someone with that kind of deep pockets would want to invest in us in the prospect of it continuing to create access for healthcare in a world right now where there's a lot of this country that's going to be in a big primary care Sahara, the way things are currently going.
Absolutely. Switching lanes a bit to one of my favorite quotes from you. Empathy isn't just a buzzword. It's a trainable cornerstone of customer loyalty. Empathy isn't just a buzzword. It's a trainable cornerstone of customer loyalty. I just know with my healthcare work that empathetic people are drawn to medicine.
Yeah.
Yet many times because of the grind, it's just ground out of them.
Yeah.
What's this thing about a trainable cornerstone? Talk to us more about that.
It is emotional intelligence that drives empathy. It's a component of, emotional intelligence. I think if we don't take care of ourselves, we lose our capacity to have empathy for others. So self-empathy, if you will, and being able to train ourselves to take care of ourselves so that we have something left over to take care of patients. That's a big part of it. But if you think of it as not like traditional IQ, where it's fixed at life and it predicts our ability to learn, EQ is something that the more we pay attention to nonverbal cues in ourselves and others, the better able we are to regulate our own emotions and take healthy pathways to create success in our emotional life, the better able we're able to read and help others do the same, the more successful we are in life. And in healthcare, we're in the crucible of some of the most emotionally wrecking moments of people's lives, and some pretty enjoyable ones too. Let's not forget births, for example. But we need to be able to help people navigate their emotions through this journey of health, wellness, disease, and discomfort.
Absolutely. Staying with empathy, how do you balance corporate organizational imperatives, which are, let's do it today, we need it. I talked to a client yesterday who The March results are double-figure million losses. And yet, empathy has to be part of the whole package. How do you balance that fine line between we need empathy as a cornerstone and, by the way, we need to turn this ship around?
I think it is very Maslowian. I mean, if you are in a survival mode, forget about empathy and just damn the tornadoes. Torpedoes. We've got to handle whatever is on the doorstep. The problem is if you are always in crisis mode, you experience adrenaline fatigue, and people are incapable of managing emotions. They are just depleted. Burnout is a real physiological phenomena that happens when our brain constantly is activating the fight or flight response without any resolution of that response. So we deplete all of our adaptive energy. We burn it out. So clearly, I am a fan of, if we're in crisis, and the pandemic was a pretty good example. I mean, we just needed to do what needed to be done. There is a point, though, where you can't run on that. And if that's all you're doing, then you're going to burn out people and they're going to leave you, and you're going to have less people to do this. So I think there's always a prioritization. There's always a triaging of what needs to be done and what are we going to give up. And I think this is the missing piece. We are very additive about things we need to do next and more. Realistically, some of the lower priority items we have to evaluate and say these need to be put on hold because of these other pressing issues. People cannot just continue to expand the amount of work that they do without it compromising their work-life balance and their discretionary effort. They just don't have the resources to continue to give more if there's just no end in sight.
And to our listeners here, one of Dr. Michelli's amazing books was using the network of all the contacts he had through a decade and a half of experience. Produced, was it in 2021, 2022?
Yeah, right in the middle of the pandemic. I think it's 2021. I think
Stronger Through Adversity.
Yeah.
This book is one of the very best I've read in the last 5 years. And
I think I knew you right after. I would have invited you to participate in that book.
Darn, missed.
Yeah, we were just a day or two off on that one. But yeah, 140 leaders. I mean, Hans Vestbergs of Verizon, the CEO of Verizon, or Brian Cornell, the CEO of Target, just really great people took the time. In healthcare, people like David Feinberg, who I referenced earlier, participated in the book as well. So I just reached out to my network and asked them how were they managing the adversity and how were they dealing with crisis in one of the most tumultuous times in healthcare and in all sectors of our economy.
And I've read a ton of books on leadership, etc. This one truly stands out. So to our readers, I would say it's a must read as you lead through what they call, I think the acronym is the VUCA, volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous, or complex and ambiguous.
Complex and ambiguous, yeah. Yeah, we are in VUCA times. I don't think they're ever turning back. And I thank you for the kind words about the book. I think it's just a reflection of all those leaders who took the time to share their strategies and their humility about not knowing what to do and the mistakes they made, which I think one of the things we can learn from is the mistakes of other leaders. We don't have to make them all ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So as we look at coming out of some of these economic crises, I go to another one of your statistics. Customers/patients with a strong emotional bond have I just chuckle at this, have a 306% higher lifetime value than those without that bond.
Yeah, let me make it easy. Let's just use Starbucks, one of my early examples. If Starbucks resonates with me emotionally, the lifetime value I have to that brand is 306% more, let's say, to use that statistic. I am likely to buy a heck of a lot more Starbucks than if Starbucks is just, they're kind of cool, they're kind of edgy, whatever they are, but they're really not. It doesn't feel like it's me. It doesn't feel like I emotionally resonate with the brand. And the key is to figure out, how do we build emotional connections, personal emotional connections with every person we serve. Once that person identifies themselves emotionally with you, feels like you're part of their psyche, a part of their identity, then lo and behold, you have that kind of loyalty. And I've worked in healthcare for example, at the Henry Ford Hospital in West Bloomfield Hills, where we really just tried to create this emotional connection. Coffered ceilings in the demo kitchen, teaching people about how to prepare healthy wellness foods, the Vita Spa before you go into your mammogram, a downtown, a Main Street USA looking Disney set of shops as you walk in, a greeter dog named Henry at the door, much like Bachelor, the greeter dog at the Ritz-Carlton. All these elements that try to take away, you're going into a sterile, scary hospital setting, you're going into a place in the community, you want to go for a healthy farm-to-plate meal. Oh, and by the way, if you need them down the road for some healthcare procedure, it's just a couple of steps beyond that entryway. And I think these are changes that people are trying to invoke in healthcare and in the world in general, because the more technology we get on board, the more sterile it's going to be, the harder it's going to be to get a person at an 800 number on a website. We're going to get chatbots galore. So how do we do some things to build that emotional connection if we want people to view us as something other than a commodity?
Excellent. Now, our audience has quite a few mid-level new leaders. What would you suggest to them as some first steps along the customer service journey? Because this isn't taught anywhere.
Yeah, I think part of what I've already implied is a step in here. Let me say this. I think I was a middle manager for a long time, and I was way too scared to do anything that would create, attention to myself. I just wanted to follow the rules, outperform, execute, right? Like that was my thing. I don't know that I had the courage to lead up. I don't know that I said to people above me, hey, I want to try some things differently. I know we've been doing it this way. So I would encourage you to think about it. I know how scary that is. So please just consider it. It's part of my regret package of my life, right? And so beyond that, I think on a real tactical level, you need to figure out what are the most high value moments, what are the complaints, you got to resolve the complaints, but you also have to celebrate some of the victories. You have to look for people doing things right and celebrate the things that they're doing right. As a manager, it's often so much in the trenches of solving problems that we fail to celebrate the people who are helping us not have problems. And if anything, pushing our organization forward. And I think being able to pay attention, it's like a parent, you have an acting out child and a really good child. It's being able to not give all of your attention to the actor outer and be able to spend some of your time really elevating and celebrating the other, in the hope that maybe some of the positive attention would cause the other to think about joining that camp.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So what I run into a lot is I work with a lot of younger individuals that are, just an example, a couple of weeks ago, a new nurse manager who is just an all-star, and she's in her early 30s. The person she reports to is probably 5 years out from retirement. Technically, this relationship could be a mother-daughter. And there's quite a bit of I don't want to sound offline here, but honey, you just do what I tell you to do and you'll be successful. But do not hit me with any new ideas. This is how we run our department, and I've promoted you, and now I'd really appreciate it if you just ran your unit well. And she has all these brilliant, cutting-edge ideas. Any coaching on how a younger generation can help the older generation say, whoa, these are some good points. We're going to get run over if we don't use them.
Yeah. So first off, it really brought back almost a traumatic memory of mine. When out of graduate school, I was working at a state hospital in California. We had funding from the legislature to do these innovative treatment programs. It was really exciting stuff. And then I went to another state, I'll have it nameless, and I worked at a state hospital that was really kind of a backwards state hospital. It really wasn't doing anything progressive. And when I would raise ideas, I would hear from somebody, look, you're going to be here 40 years. Do not start raising ideas. Yeah, I mean, it really was the same messaging, right? I promptly went to some other place that was more open to that. So I think there's always that risk. You're going to lose people who are trying to make your organization better. And sometimes just young people think they can do anything. Like I was naive on how things got done. So it is a reciprocal mentorship that needs to happen. And I think if you are coming into that place, you have to come in and say, I want to respect the legacy of that which is here. So coaching to the younger generation on, you can't throw everything out, and no, you can't have my job next week. Like, those are not options. Now, the alternative, coaching to the senior leader, is no, you're not going to be here beyond the next few years. This organization cannot continue in the trajectory it is. Healthcare is broken because we haven't figured out how to fix it. We need a lot of ideas and a lot of people giving us ideas, and we need to try things we haven't tried before. So how do we both come at each other with the respect of what each other brings to the table? And we bring different things. And it is a negotiated world, really, if you do it well. It's some of the time my ideas that have been around a while are something you should consider. And some of the time my ideas that have been around a while are things I should remove for the new suggestions you're giving. And I think we're seeing it, technology is changing healthcare so quickly. If you're not on the cutting edge of a lot of the big data tech, you're going to be out of a job anyway, right? Like, it's just, you're not going to adapt to focus in on the things that we need to do with that data and how we need to evaluate it ethically and in other ways, right? We're not going to be great at suggesting the right prompts because we're so intimidated by it. So, bottom line, I think this is a matter of the person coming in being assertively compassionate to the person who's been there a while, and vice versa.
Assertively compassionate. Give us a little more on that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I just don't think I can let you tell me that my ideas don't have a place, right? Nor can I come in and act as though your years of experience have no place. So that's the line we should take, and the assertiveness. No, you can't just run through me like I didn't do anything here in the last 30 years. And no, I can't treat you like your ideas are worthless. Those are assertive boundaries that the person who is feeling like they're being bottled in needs to be able to challenge that, but they have to do it with compassion. You have to respect the fact that maybe there's fear for the person leaving about all this technology. Maybe we have to have some compassion for the fact that there is idealism in youth that you have to temper over time in life. We have to have compassion for these things, because once upon a time I was that young idealist. And, someday probably that young person is going to be facing a whole new generation of people who are way more progressive and crazily out there than they could even imagine. That stepping into the shoes of, the empathy of, is the compassion, but the assertiveness. You don't just back down. Great service isn't servitude. It's setting appropriate boundaries and then negotiating within those boundaries.
So before I let a world expert off the line here, a question that comes to mind that wasn't in our pre-questions, but if you were talking to Carl, who was mid-career, who really hasn't had an exposure to customer service, could you, choosing from your books, give me just a self-curriculum here of what I should read over the next few months to get a grounding in what you have so expertly explained to us today? Where do I
Given your audience, I think it is the upcoming book. I'm not trying to sell the new book, but I think it is. I mean, it really, all business is personal. And this is a book about high performance teams too. It's a book about lean technologies. It's a book about leveraging AI effectively. So it's got all that stuff in it. But the undercurrent is starting with this idea of being human-centered. And how do we design people, process, and technologies that pay attention to the wants, needs, and desires, stated and unstated, of the person in front of you. And I think this is a great starting point. If you want warm and touchy-feelier books, go to the Starbucks book that are all about, kind of lighter side of it. But there's plenty of heartwarming stories of the difference of being told about a brain tumor from somebody who did it in a very clinically sterile way and somebody who infused a sense of understanding and hope. There's plenty of amazing stories on the impact just little subtle ways that we treat people change the way they move forward in their disease and recovery process.
Perfect. I can't thank you enough for spending yet another episode with us, Joseph.
Yeah, it was really hard, Carl. I'm telling you, it was traumatic beyond measure. So, no, I adore you. I'm so grateful. You are so kind about suggesting people read my books, but I really am glad people are tuning into this podcast. I hope they're reaching out to you on the backside of it to have you help them lead in these really crazy times, particularly for healthcare.
And so to our listeners, I know many of you with your busy schedule fit this in on the drive to work or on the exercise bike or some other apparatus of torture there. But please take some time to sit down with this one and re-listen, because there is, and it's just, and I keep going on here, I was going to end the program, but there is such an energy that comes by putting into practice what you have studied over the last 2 decades. It is
I think it's important. I think it's real important. I hope people will process it however much they want to, but ultimately make the world a better place, one patient at a time, next patient up.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for your time today, Doctor. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carl.